Inside Story Uganda, real source of political updates.
Campaigns to be this murky.
I've never unexpected it. But, I made a decision that I would not have time to argue with such people like Honorable Nobert Mau. When someone talks comfortably because he's earning 80 million per month, he's talking comfortably that nothing has police done, what, because he earns 80 million per month. My mother here, I saw him fighting there looking for votes because he wants to earn 46 million. Yet we have peasants there in Mayuge, young boys who are working for 2,000 per day. We don't have a minimum wage here.
What does the president earn? Why are you fighting to be the president of Uganda?
Because I want to liberate the country. You see, but now when you look at people arguing as if they are in their own world, we wonder. When other people are dying, people are brutalized, people are in prisons. Even the prisons are full now. So I don't feel comfortable.
Thank you. General Mugisha Muntu, you've been a participant in quite a number of elections. At least this is the second shot that you're giving the presidency. Earlier, you were coordinating campaigns for Dr. Kizza Besigye. Has there been any shift in the patterns or in the trends that follow or that run during the campaigns? General Muntu, I hope you can hear me. Is there anything that's making this particular electoral season peculiar in any way compared to others where you've been a participant or a chief coordinator? Lewis, that NUP has arrogantly sustained their campaign to look security, look shabby, and no wonder it is provoking these kinds of skirmishes between you and security. Is there a possibility that you can negotiate a middle ground that would see you comply with the guidelines?
I mean, what guidelines are we not complying with? Or what are we doing that creates this situation that you're talking about?
You're doing rallies in the middle of roads.
What we are asking for is fairness. What we are asking for is justice. If all other presidential candidates are allowed to use the main routes, we want to be allowed to use the main route. If all other presidential candidates can make stopovers and say hello to people at markets for a minute or two, we want to be able to do that. If other presidential candidates are being allowed to hold rallies in the middle of towns, we want to do that. If other presidential candidates or their supporters are allowed to do processions, we want to be able to do that. If other presidential candidates are allowed to address people on radio stations, we want to be able to do that. So all we're asking is equality, is equity, is fairness, is justice. And I felt very bad listening to...
Is it NUP alone?
What's that?
Is it NUP alone that's denied the privileges?
Of course. I'm asking you, here is a presidential candidate, ask other presidential candidates. And we've been asking this question. And of course, it's what General Muntu said, because of the numbers, because of the support. It is not our crime that we have so many supporters. But if you see where General Museveni is going, either even when he goes there or a day before, the whole processions, I had Mao talking about caravans. Who has organized those caravans more than NRM? They even have these people who move on borders with the yellow helmets, moving around, and they're involved in the chaos in Gulu. You've not seen police come out to ask why they are doing this. But they come and start beating up our people. I had Nobert Mau again trivializing a very, very serious situation, saying that no major things have happened. We have buried more than 5, 6 people as NUP. Tomorrow a young man in Gulu will be buried who was killed by these thugs. You know, Kalunji Hassan was killed in Kawempe. You had Mesa Chokelo killed in Iganga. So it's already a very, very nasty situation. And when you look at each of these circumstances, you clearly see that all that was unavoidable. All these people are dying senselessly because the regime is afraid of the support that we attract. So what we're asking for is fairness. What we're asking for is justice across the board. That NUP should be able to be treated as any other presidential candidate or presidential campaign. President Chagulanyi should be given equal treatment as any other presidential candidate.
Well, General Mugisha Muntu, as someone who has participated in campaigns before, what is standing out peculiarly in the 2026 election?
Well, really, the elections have been following the same trends. The only problem is the magnitude. Every time General 7 is on that ballot box, on that ballot paper, what is expected is that the candidates who would pull crowd, because that's the psychology of the regime. They think that the more a person is able to pull crowd, the more popular they are. And therefore the concentration is to ensure that they use methods that would control the building of momentum crowd. Because if they don't use the methods which they are using to cause fear for people not to continue going on to or around the candidate who's putting the crowd. So once they use the method that they use, therefore they control people, they will disperse them. I don't think that that is about to change. I really would be surprised if it changed. And if it changed, then that means that there would have been change of heart in the side of those who are in the regime, that they would have now decided to have a free, fair, and transparent electoral process. So basically, this has nothing to do with even any particular candidate, as I had indicated before. We saw the same tactics being used in 2006, 2011, 2016. Even now, 2021 was different in the sense that there was COVID, and the regime was lucky in that sense that it created an environment which they could have total control in terms of the building up of crowds because of the COVID situation that there was. It wasn't only local, it was also global. But this time around, of course, it's more or less like how it used to be before 2021. And I can tell you that out of us who are the 7 candidates who are organizing to oust General 70, even if there are 2 or 3 who would be able to attract crowds or organize crowds, and then they would be seeing a building up of momentum, they would do the same thing. To me, I don't think it has got any specific relationship to a particular candidate. It only has a specific relationship to the crowds. The regime really fears crowds and the building of momentum. That's where all this thing moves around. The moment you remove the issue of crowds, I think there would be comfort by the regime. But yet, when the candidates who are nominated, and depending on the method that each candidate uses, which is also legitimate and lawful, I think what the regime would do would be simply to see how the police force would be able to not to disperse the crowds, but to see how to manage the processes, to manage traffic and things like that. I think there is a possibility for that to be done. And I would like to believe that if the police was able to sit down with the candidates who use the approach of organizing huge rallies, I think they would come to an understanding on how they can first contain traffic flows or manage traffic flows, and therefore have a win-win situation. If there was that sense that we need to have a free, fair, and transparent electoral process, which unfortunately is not the case.
You've not been disrupted. Doesn't this make you a lame duck candidate who is not attracting the attention of security? how come you have been spared of this violence from security forces? Could it be because you are now looked at as a lame duck candidate who doesn't pose any threat?
One thing I'm sure of, if we focused our effort and resources on building crowds, I would like to believe that exactly what's happening to Nup would happen to us. Let me tell you, if we were to organize a crowd and they see 10,000, 20,000 people, there is no doubt, I have no doubt about that in my mind. It's not only myself, any of the 7 candidates would be able to do that. The same tactics would be against that candidate. Because the fear is the building of momentum. If a candidate, for example, goes in one city and they're able to build 10,000 and nothing is done, then the next city it will attract more people to gather around the candidate. Now it becomes 20,000, then it becomes 30,000, and then the momentum builds. And therefore, when momentum builds, then it's changed. It's in a sense, it shapes public perception that this is a popular candidate, and that's what terrifies the regime. And yet, in my own estimation, really, okay, crowd, the visuals are very, very important in politics, the optics. But at the same time, I know that there is no candidate amongst all of us, the 8, including Genome 7, who tracks people in the rallies in which he goes. None is going to meet physically, in terms of rallies, more than 3.5 or 4 million people. Yet there are 21 million voters. So I wonder why the regime even gets that terrified. Because it means that if the utmost that any candidate can meet is about 4 million voters, that would mean that there are 17 million whom no candidate is going to be able to meet. And therefore, there are other channels of influence. For us, that's where we focus most. We believe that if you're able to reach about 15, 16 million people through media, TV, radio, social media.
Honorable Mao, the outcry from National Unity Platform is more about fair play, that you are according a lot of latitude to other candidates and hounding out their candidate, Robert Chagulanyi. What's your take?
Like I said before, whatever you are saying should start from a premise. I do not think you have laid out any premise to justify what you are saying. What needs to be said is that an election does not begin on the day that we have nominations. There is always a build-up. Unless we detoxify the political environment in Uganda, we are going to have these incidents. We are going to have violence. And that is why the country as a whole needs to decide, what sort of democracy do we want? Should elections be an election such that you have a candidate who needs to wear a helmet, and you have a candidate who needs to wear an armored vest, bulletproof? The answer does not lie in TV studios, really. The talking heads may give their analysis. The political leaders may continue blaming each other. But we need to put citizens at the center of elections. It cannot just be about the candidates and the political parties that they represent. I insist that we need to talk about the kind of Uganda we want. We need to sanitize our politics. We need to have a culture of talking to one another. We need to stop ascribing bad faith to our competitors. To me, those are the foundational things that we need to address. These incidents, they can be unpacked. And cameras these days rove wherever there are crowds. We don't have to even do any research about who did what. And the laws are there. So that is something for the Electoral Commission to take over. Do you know that the Electoral Commission can even move the High Court to deregister a political party if that political party is conducting itself in a manner which is totally against the national ethos and against the code of conduct of political parties. But right now, we have not even got any political party being cautioned. But more importantly, each political party should ensure that its members adhere to the code of conduct of political parties. I even doubt whether many political parties teach their members about a code of conduct of political parties. I think we cannot discuss these things without talking about what the law says. These laws are not suggestions. These laws are non-negotiable. These laws apply to everyone. So it is really not necessary for anybody to be accused of giving latitude to one political party or another. As a matter of fact, all the political parties are capable of violence. Even the political parties that we think are very peaceful, they are all capable of violence. But right now, the rivalry is primarily between the NUP and the NRM. And the NUP is very good at crying out loud when something happens. But I do remember in the last elections, there are NUP activists who poured acid on a young lady who was simply wearing a yellow T-shirt of President Museveni. Now, many of those things are not amplified because the NUP knows how to present its case better, I think, and to present itself as the victim. So I hope that we don't reach a point where we have an impasse. The sooner we sit together, the better.
Grand accusation towards the National Unity Platform. Could you give more evidence to what you claim that NUP supporters touched an NRM supporter?
They poured acid. That is there. I actually have the details. It was in Kira. In Kira. Now, I want to repeat what I normally say. We have extreme elements in all political parties. And it is the duty of a political party to restrain its extreme elements, because extremists undermine the common good in any organization. Whether an organization has good intentions, if it has extreme elements, so there are extremists in NRM also, and there are also extremists in the NUP. Now, it is important that each political party must deal with extremism. And that's why I base my argument on the law and on the code of conduct.
A case of the violence that ensued in Gulu over the weekend. What was glaring was that security had an upper hand, and then there was an electoral commission that seemed to be hapless in one way or the other. Then there is also the National Resistance Movement, whose supporters donned yellow T-shirts under the ghetto youth establishment. How do you connect the dots here?
I can tell you without any fear of contradiction that those who instigated that violence, those people who were riding motorcycles while wearing yellow, they were in breach of the law. They were in breach of the code of conduct. The ringleaders should be arrested. that lady who went on social media boasting, there are two gentlemen who are wielding machetes. All those should be arrested for the interest of the whole country. The law is very clear, the code of conduct is very clear, that no political party should disrupt the activities of another political party. For all intents and purposes, last Saturday, Gulu was clearly for the NUP presidential candidate. And therefore, any other actor who tried to show any sign of activity, either to hold marches or to hold parades, like that border parade that I saw, they were acting illegally, and no one should defend them. It is in the law. So if we don't want to obey the law, let's say so. There was no need. I don't think that it was even called for. That is why that violence was roundly condemned. What is left now is to act.
When you talk condemnation, would you boldly condemn the role of the military that seems to be overtaking police and clobbering people left, right, and center?
I have been pleading with police, telling police, please, why don't you have loudspeakers which you use to communicate what you are trying to achieve? Sometime when the police arrives, the onlookers don't even know what the altercations are about. You only see facial expressions and the candidate shouting at the police, and the police shouting at the candidate, then a mob gathering. When you are enforcing the law, you must be authoritative. So why don't the police mount loudspeakers on their vehicles and tell the crowds what they are trying to achieve? It is as simple as that. These are not cows. If they are talked to, they will act. If the police can, through a loudspeaker, state clearly, as I've been hearing them saying on TV, yes.
Now, how come you haven't spoken out on the military openly coming out to campaign for President Museveni, and also their overzealousness, their ruthlessness in clobbering supporters of the opposition?
Like I told you, where we have reached now is not just about speaking out. What we need is action. First and foremost, it is totally untrue that I've not been speaking out. We expect the armed forces to be non-partisan. That is what makes them trusted. There is no need for anybody to repeat that. But there are also procedures of dealing with that. And I think it is possible to do it without necessarily politicizing it. We have got organs. But when you politicize everything, then it falls through the cracks. Then those who are being accused get an avenue. I was in Parliament when one member of Parliament stood up and accused a
Definitely be getting back to you. Before we take a very short break, do you observe that things are really getting out of hand? No. That military is openly standing on the podium to campaign for President Museveni?
No. We have 353 direct constituencies. Mentioned for me 10, 50 or 100 constituencies where, first of all, NRM people have fought with rival groups.
No, I'm talking
No,
about
no, 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 no,
military
no, no,
campaign.
no, 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 no. There are 3 accusations made. You have cited Gulu municipality. He cited the Kazo Kiruhura.
There was Chiruhura.
Kiruhura. Now,
Where
well, you can't say everywhere because they are not there.
Mbarara.
They are not there in Tororo. They are not there in Tororo.
There were incidents in
They-
Iganga.
After there were incidents, the fact that they were not on a large scale does not mean
They have not been there in Parisa where I have been operating the whole of Eastern. I have not seen. 2, when we say the military, I want to believe you are saying probably the UPDF.
Yes.
Also, that's not true because I think it is better to name specific instances and preferably
In Masaka,
officers.
in Masaka, we have seen soldiers from the fisheries unit.
Listen, no, and I am coming.
Just a minute.
Please, I have not seen any instruction, any order, any message from UPDF directing military personnel to campaign for President Yoweri
Now,
Museveni. However, I have seen, in my case, I have seen only 2 officers, I think. General D. Kolum, I think in his home area in Zombo, I saw once, and this lady, the Lieutenant Colonel, the one in charge of fisheries, obviously those ones.
Plus several others.
And many others.
You are not my
Do
eyes.
they have a carte blanche to go and campaign?
You are not my eyes. I have said I have seen these 2.
But we are telling
So
you
I
what you have
I
seen.
would prefer that you mention specific
So what
places
actions have been taken
and
on those
specific
people?
officers. I am not there to follow up on what UPDF does.
Okay,
with this
do
officer.
you take this in isolation?
Yeah,
Considering there are just
no,
2.
No, I take that there are isolated instances. There could be cases I have not seen, I have not observed, but I take it as isolated cases, and therefore those officers should be mentioned, brought to book through their command, restrained, and if the offense calls for punishment, it is done so. 2, or rather 3, I'm also aware that in the case of Chagulanyi, and you see, I don't even want to say NUP, because NUP has other candidates, parliamentary candidates, LC5, whose campaigns, my young brother here told us in the break, he has been campaigning in Kampala. But
the presidential election.
No, please.
You see, there's a difference. Let me educate you. There's a presidential election and a parliamentary election.
No, you want to talk as if there's only presidential election.
But they are governed by different laws.
As far as I know, there has been engagement directly between security services
You know
and
that
Chagulanyi.
I'm demanding your candidate 3 million.
Chagulanyi. Now, ask yourself, as far as the few police officers who have interacted with him and I have talked to, they say they have actually been retraining themselves. And that's why I was asking.
First wait, do you know that I'm demanding your candidate 3 million? First wait,
Look for my candidate. If don't you know his address?
because I paid money in the venue when I was in Namisindwa. The SFC refused me to use the venue because your candidate was coming on Saturday, a day before.
Don't you know the address of my candidate? Please.
And now what you are explaining is
What
not
my
coming
candidate
out.
understood, man. But that's why I was asking you. That point in mathematics, we call it point of inflection. Where did the police, that has been restraining itself and engaging Chagulanyi, at what point has their nerve broken or bent? In my view, I think it is both. The police has been restraining themselves, and I think they are reaching a point where they're saying enough is enough. Probably they shouldn't reach there as a law enforcement. Now, Chagulanyi, in my view, the first 1 month, it was uneventful. We are turning the last curve, and I think he sees. I don't think he's stupid, but I think he's seeing that if it does not make hyperbole, does not make this eventful, it could pass him, and he thinks that he can salvage his campaigns and probably his electoral fortune by doing
I might need to fact check you here. You can't say the first month was uneventful.
No. I'm saying not to the level where it is.
Look at what happened at Natete.
I know you're a sympathizer of Chagulanyi.
There you go. That's blackmail now.
No, not blackmail. Is it true you stood on DP ticket
That's way back. That's way back. You can't let that drag us. You can't drag this here.
Let us review your own moderation of this show. Whether this
Can we go for facts? Can we go for the substance of the show?
Yes, there could have been issues, but this inflection where we have now gone to where you yourself you think we are at a point beyond redemption. Or redemption will be very difficult. And I want to answer that particular one. NRM political party campaigners, presidential candidate, and the government of NRM will not allow the situation to go beyond redemption. There are many mechanisms for hearing each other that I want to believe the NRM and the NRM party, which is the dominant anyway, is going to apply to ensure that escalation doesn't go beyond.
I find it rather absurd that you downplay the deaths and the wounds inflicted on Ugandans by premeditated violent officers.
Well, I am saying there could be premeditated. I don't have that evidence. There could be five. That one we can count the deaths and the injuries we can count, but they are not the overwhelming majority. And I am saying, few as they are, it is disturbing. But your wish, which is NUPU's wish, by the way, that the situation goes out of control, so that they appeal to the international media. And I mean, they have already been appealing to the international media. We shall not let that situation escalate beyond imaginable.
We'll take a very short break, but for the record, it's not nobody's wish.
We are not a sympathizer
to the Electoral Commission. About all these military officers you're seeing who are campaigning openly, including Lieutenant General Okidi, who was busy demonizing president's child and all that. So we've put all these things on record. And every time we have we are treated unfairly, we make these formal complaints to the Electoral Commission.
What's always their response?
Nothing. Nothing.
Well, let me get to Honorable Mao as I sign you out. Honorable, do you imagine in the coming days the Electoral Commission ought to have a firmer grip onto all stakeholders to have a sane process?
You're asking me about the role of the Electoral Commission, right? In any game, there is always a referee, but the referee is not a law unto himself. In this case of an election, the referee is the Electoral Commission. They are bound by laws. Now, the Electoral Commission does not operate in a vacuum. Many of the hazards that they have to deal with, the contentions, the abuses of the law, the impunity, these are things that our society is still grappling with. Our society is struggling very hard to have some basic consensus about what we should all defend. It starts from the Constitution. If we indeed we say that the people are sovereign, then that means the single most important activity is an election. We are a republic. Not all of us can be invited every time a major decision is supposed to be taken. We delegate that power through, and we elect representatives, and these representatives make the decisions on our behalf through a majority vote. Now, there are things that the Electoral Commission cannot do. The Electoral Commission does not have an army. The Electoral Commission does not have the police. As a matter of fact, the Electoral Commission is supposed, like I said earlier, to be like a referee. A referee does not walk into the football pitch with an army or even a police. So it's easy for us to have our expectations of the Electoral Commission. But I think the legitimate expectation that we should have of the Electoral Commission is to always draw the line very, very firmly. Sometimes they have managed to draw the line. Sometimes they have found it very difficult, like in Kawempe. I remember speaking to the chairman of the Electoral Commission about Kawempe, and he told me that he even considered nullifying the whole process because it was getting out of hand. But then he told himself, so what would we achieve at the end of the day? What we are trying to do is to get people to express themselves through their vote. The Electoral Commission is not a body to be envied now. They are having a lot of problems. But what matters most is for us to de-escalate conflict. I like what OO said, that there is a sort of the dramatic in the NUP candidate. He wants to present himself as a tragic figure, as a hero. And you know, for every hero, there must be a villain. And the only way to create a villain is to create a situation where there can be a victim. So I think there is need for straight talk, not between the Electoral Commission and NUP only, but even between NUP and NRM. Unfortunately, that has been impossible because of the attitude of the NUP. But I do believe that going forward, things are going to get better. I don't agree with those who say things are going to get worse. The Electoral Commission, the police, and the military have to keep picking up the lessons. I'm still optimistic that we are going to cross the finishing line in these elections when we are better.
Oh, in your early days as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, you were vouching for electoral reforms, warning that elections would be useless if there were no reforms. Has it come to pass that here is another useless election loading?
What I spoke about, of course, were processes. And as you know, a minister of government does not sit in his office and issue a decree to change laws. There are very, very many actors. What we have not been able to do, I believe the will to do it better the next time is always there. But I know that our main emphasis was on biometric verification. And that is going to be there. There were worries about the machines. That has been resolved. Citizens don't even know how much this election is going to cost. Actually, this is going to be the costliest election we have ever had. Now, for that reason, with all that investment, let's really do our best to ensure that we all adhere to the law without exception. And those who breach the law, those who act with impunity, should be called out. I don't think our biggest problem are the laws. The laws that we have are actually superb. They can enable citizens to choose. We can have free and fair elections with the laws that we have. What matters most is mutual goodwill.
Very much for sparing time to speak to us. Honorable General Mugisha Muntu, as I sign you off, do you look at this as an election free and fair that you can write home about?
Whenever we participate in these elections, it is never that we would be expecting them to be free and fair. Our participation normally is to continue building capacity to overwhelm the regime in spite of the unfairness of the system that they do establish to manipulate the process. Also, too, the more you push, the more the regime gets exposed. Because for quite a while, there are people who thought that, oh, the regime was doing quite well. But every time you push them, they expose them as to who they are. So much as they manipulate the electoral process, the participation itself is very, very important in as far as I'm concerned. It's part of a process of struggle. You can imagine if there had been no counter forces since 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, 2017. The process has been long, but inevitably, I think, I'm not one of those who would think that, oh, getting involved in this kind of elections is a waste of time. It is not. As long as we keep on organizing to ensure that we build a better country, we build a better future, to me, it is worth the participation. Would the regime try to manipulate the electoral process again? I believe so. But we must also keep on organizing the population, keep on raising their consciousness and their boldness. Because I've seen a number of times, even when the regime wants to manipulate the process, when people change and they change in significant numbers in areas where you found that people have got tired, and about 80% or 80 out of 100 decide to take a stand, normally the regime gets overwhelmed. If that is to happen in, say, 80% of the country, I think in spite of whatever manipulation they do, we would still be able to overwhelm them. So we must keep on applying effort without giving up. It is our country. We must recover it.
What is your projection in terms of percentage if you are to win this election? Well, perhaps I've lost you, but I must really thank you very much, General Mugisha Muntu and Honorable Norbert Mao, for connecting with us virtually to share your perspective. I'll come to you, Honorable Kasivante. If you are to make any prediction under the current circumstances, are you winning or losing already?
No, I'm not losing. That's what I can say, to request Ugandans to trust.
Are you winning?
Yeah, I'm winning, of course.
By what percentage?
By 53, 54, around there. Because now when you look at the rallies that have been having, at least in each district, you may look at me, I make 7 to 8 rallies, and that is the point, because each rally you can have 2,000, 3,000, which is, and those are the real people in that district. But now my request.
What is your edge over Kyagulanyi? What is your advantage over Robert Kyagulanyi?
My advantage that Honorable Kyagulanyi was a member of parliament. He was part of these other candidates that we are talking about that have been taking the taxpayers' money. He also got a chance of eating the taxpayers' money, which we are talking, and they failed, like how I've heard Honorable Robert Mao talking about the laws and what of it. He is part of the government and the SDP group, but they have failed to come up with proper laws. Now, when you look at the electoral laws, when you look at clear the electoral laws that is talking about, how could you have how could you go in elections where a sitting president is always a candidate? We are crying.
Did you say you are at 53%?
Yes.
Isn't that a joke?
That is according to you. But to me, who is in the field, I'm sure that I'm there. But let me first wind up with this. Just to request Ugandans that you trust us, because trust me with your votes. Because these are some of the things that we have to amend. One, we must make sure that we amend the electoral laws. That the sitting president should not be a president when we are going in campaigns. That is one. Then secondly, the military and the police, we are looking at you. You are going to be accountable individually. So make sure that whatever you do, killing Ugandans, for us we are ready to die if you continue with that brutality.
Thank you very much.